What's up, everybody? Peter Exodus O'Coffer, and welcome to another episode of All Things Music. And today, I've been sitting on this for a while, but I think it's time on my channel. I've got enough episodes in and taking it to a different level in some ways. But the title of today's or this episode is Monetizing Music Catalogs in the 21st Century. You got a lot of people paying a lot of money for these catalogs, and they're acting like it's the 20th century, meaning they're being very passive in what they're doing with these catalogs. They're paying a lot of money for them. So, we're going to do a little bit of the math in a minute. But I always now, with all the changes coming to the arts, the non-visual arts, whether it's, music and streaming, mainly music, but it's happening to everybody. I always ask myself, what would a painter or visual artist do? Because they've seen all this before. And, when the camera was invented, they had to get really creative and start hustling. Because it's like, why would I buy a painting from you when I can just, get a photographer to take this picture? So let's look at right now the main ways. I have 11 down. I may have missed one. Probably will definitely be doing some follow-up episodes to this. So, hey, if I miss anything, I will pick it up and part two down the road. So how are you going to make money off of the catalog you just purchased for a couple $100 million? Well, obviously, first one is streaming. Number two would be physical sales, and mainly right now it's records. I keep running across some stray folks saying cassettes are coming back. Don't think cassettes will be coming back. If anything comes back, it'll be CDs. You have to, people aren't going to be patient enough to rewind and fast forward a cassette when all you have to do is press a button and a number and get to the song on the CD. 3, radio play. That's still around for some of these catalogs, but 20, a lot of these catalogs are, rooted in classic rock, and I don't think there's going to be any classic rock stations left in 15 or 20 years. I did some, if you look at my 3 things in a month last week, I talk about how certain music is leaving, some of these platforms. I talk about my the cable and Music Choice and how, they just don't play classic blues anymore. They play very little, smooth jazz is, that's the jazz channel now, jazz without vocalists, and they're not playing Miles, and they're not playing, it's all contemporary stuff. They're not playing Coltrane. The other, the channel just jazz is mostly jazz singers. And so, the blues, they're not playing BB, they're not playing Howlin' Wolf, they're not playing Coco, they're playing newer stuff. And occasionally, if you listen for a couple hours, you'll hear they'll drop a oldie in there every once in a while. And even I'm in the kick right now for the golden oldie station, which is the 50s and the 60s, but now you have the Beatles dropping into the golden oldies, and they weren't playing the Beatles 5 years ago. They're still playing Little Richard, and they're still playing Chuck Berry. But when the Beatles start going from strato classic rock and golden oldies, there's a shift going on. And blatantly, when the fan base for those older music forms passes on, Music Choice ain't messing with you. So so that's what's going on anyway. So that's number 3, radio play. 4, movie placement, still big, and movie, should say TV placement as well. 5, video games. Still a lot going on, but some folks aren't going to, don't have the type of catalog that will lend themselves to video games. 6, cover songs, still big. 7, sampling. We'll get to that later. used to be big, still can be big. I think that's something, these companies need to tap. 8 advertisements, depending on the artist that works. For some artists, their fan base isn't going to go for it. 9 merchandise. Yes, but some acts don't do much merchandise. 10 release music from the vault. Some acts don't have a lot of stuff sitting in the vault. Interestingly enough, Led Zeppelin, Coda was the stuff in the vault. They released everything else, from what I understand. So some bands are very efficient. It doesn't look like Michael Jackson has much in that vault. I know there's been some post-death Michael Jackson stuff released, but there's question of whether that was Michael or not. And then finally, number 11, release concert recordings. Everybody has that, and that is a good way to go. Let's talk about some of the two acts I really like. I'm not gonna, but they were, for a while, they were the 2 biggest sales of catalogs, and that's Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan, and they were in between 400 and 500 million, and really until Michael Jackson, half of his catalog went for 600 million. They were the largest, and I believe the rumor out there is that Queen will go for 1 billion to 1.2 billion. But let's talk about Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan. Now, I'm not, I love them both, and at some point I'm going to rate catalogs. I'm not going to do the top 10, large, mid-size, and small catalogs. I'm not going to do the top 10 because I'm going to do it by tiers. And, so just starting off, Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan are top tier when it comes to large catalogs. They will make that. A lot of respect. I talk about Bob Dylan, probably the greatest lyricist of all time. That being said, let's go back through this list again and look at both of them. Streaming, yes, they both will make money that way. Physical sales, yes. Radio play, when classic rock radio stations go, I don't know if Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan are going to get that much radio play. Elvis doesn't get a lot of radio play anymore. Chuck Berry doesn't get a lot of radio play anymore. Little Richard doesn't get a lot of radio play anymore. Now, we'll come back to this because this is part of, this passive approach and letting these catalogs just do what they're going to do on their own. That's a problem. But how the industry is approaching these catalogs right now. Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan aren't going to be getting much radio play in 15 to 20 years. And if you're paying $500 million, you want them getting that radio play. Radio play, I'm pretty sure still pays more than streaming. Movie placement. Yeah, Bob Dylan, Lay Lady Lay, Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run. There's always there will always be movies out there that can use those 2 songs, but is there a lot of them out there? They'll get some movie placement. I'm on Fire, Bruce Springsteen. That's another one that's good for movie placement. I don't think I can't think of a movie where either one of these two have had movie placement. Sure, it's out there, but there are bigger catalogs that from other artists that have more quote unquote movie placement candidates. And this is going back why I the beauty of classic rock and R&B is because they cover all the human emotions, and for some of those acts, there's a lot of movie placement options in their catalogs. 6, cover songs. Yeah, Dylan's been covered by a lot of people. Springsteen is not. They're both kind of hard to cover, but yeah, you'll get some cover songs out of there. Sampling, mainly hip hop. Nobody's sampled, but, a lot of this has to do with beats per minute. I mean, there's some things in there by Bob Dylan, particularly that you could sample and you could do some interesting stuff with, but nobody has done it. And in the classic era, the sampling era of the late 80s and early 90s, those folks didn't look at Dylan. But yeah, I mean, I would sample some Dylan. The problem is it's a little expensive right now, and we'll get to that. Advertisements. I mean, I don't know if the Dylan fan base or the Springsteen fan base is going to be real happy about seeing, their hero songs on McDonald's commercials. So it might be a while before you can do that. Releasing music from the vault. I assume both of them have unreleased material, and that will come at some point. And finally, number 11, release concert recordings. With particularly with Springsteen, he was very, from the 70s, he and the Rolling Stones were heavily bootlegged when it came to live recording. So yeah, open up that vault and, get that stuff out. Dylan, they've already started opening up the vault and releasing stuff. I have not looked at Springsteen, but I know he came out in the early 90s with a box set of live recordings and folks lost their minds. So, and I'm sure there's plenty of other live recordings. So yes, with Bruce Springsteen, that will definitely bring some money in. So if I paid $400 or $500 million for a music catalog, I would not just have it sitting there. Again, I go back to the art world, and there's a thing where they call curating in the art world. So what is that? You select and organize artists' works for presentation in an exhibit, show, or project. So, it's not just sitting there. You are actively working the catalog and doing things with the catalog. So luckily, we're only 2 years in, really, when it comes to buying these music catalogs. And let me say this about Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan. I don't blame them for selling their catalogs for $400 to $500 million. If someone offered me $400 to $500 million for my catalog, I would jump at it. But from a business sense, you need to do more than just make money off of streams and vinyl, and the 11 things I talked about. And to preserve Dylan and Springsteen's legacy, come on, you want to go out there and work it a little. So, right now, these companies are buying up these catalogs, are using what I would call the regular economic model, or, classic economics, the invisible hand, let the natural market do its thing. Yeah, you just paid $400 to $500 million for this. I would go out there and milk it. I'm arguing that, a new kind of art economic market where you stimulate the market constantly, and do things to create interest in the catalog and engage people out there. I think it's good for the folks who own these catalogs, and it's good for the artists, and it's good for their legacies when they pass on. Let's look at the jazz era. You have, to be blunt about it, you have at the top, you have, Miles Davis and John Coltrane, and you have Dexter, that second tier, you have Dexter Gordon, you have I'm blank. Oscar Peterson, you got Freddie Hubbard, you got Cannonball Adderley, Sonny Rollins. I'm listing some of my favorites. But, there's only about 10 or 12 names that have made, outside, in that second, 10 to 15 names in that second tier, that, Max Roach on drums, Thelonious Monk on piano. I mean, this is a drop in a bucket when it comes to the great jazz people, of the 40s and 50s and 60s. I mean, it's a drop in a bucket. And, uh, I mean, jazz folks were never big on branding, but there's a lot of stuff, and I don't know. And then you have to, think about the universal fire too when it comes to, these great jazz folks from the 40s and 50s, because a lot of masters got lost in that. So for some of the great jazz folks, if you don't have vinyl, you don't have their stuff. Blues, I mean, it's B.B. King, Howlin' Wolf, Coco Taylor, Muddy Waters, and then you got Albert King and um, uh, forget the other king, can't think of his name right now. But most of the great blues folks are lost to history. Jazz vocalists. I mean, obviously Billie Holiday, and you got Cab Calloway, and you got Dinah Washington, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan. There's a lot more great jazz vocalists out there that have been lost to history again. So, if you're not constantly, stimulating the market for these folks, then they're going to be lost to history. And in some ways, I think the selling of those catalogs are a good thing, because this era, the 60s and on, these folks that they're paying the big money, they're going to figure this out. But the whole passive approach to this. I mean, this is what Hypnosis took. Hypnosis was one of the big folks buying up. I think they had $3 billion worth of catalogs, and they had to sell off a bunch of them just in the last 4 or 5 months because they weren't making the money back. So, yeah, we need to, folks need to start working the market. I mean, think of, every other week you're reading a Warhol, Andy Warhol or Jean-Michel Basquiat, sold a painting for $40 or $50 million, and they both passed 40 years ago. Well, why is that? Well, I mean, they were both represented. Their art dealer was Larry Gagosian, and Larry's up there in his years right now, but Larry, stimulates the market. I mean, there's a huge market out there. There's a lot of people that love Basquiat's and love Warhols, and he's constantly, moving the needle, and hey, so-and-so wants to sell this Warhol. You want to buy it? And the other thing is, that they do with a lot of these classic painters is they'll have shows for them in New York or Paris or London or whatever, and borrow them from some of their, or out of museums or whatever, and bring them back together to re-stimulate interest. So, yeah, I mean, if you're paying this money, you gotta prime the pump. The branding never stops, once you pay, that, top dollar for a catalog. Branding continues. So let's do the math on streaming alone. Now, it was about 2 years since I looked at the streaming rates for the big 6 streamers out there, and surprisingly, pleasant surprise that Pandora and YouTube have kind of upped their game, and they're in there with the other 4. They were lagging way, way behind. There were point and lots of zeros, as far as, per stream. So nobody's paying a penny per stream. So let's just break this down. For 1 billion streams, the king by far is Tidal, $12.8 million for a billion streams. Spotify, the king of streaming. So, Tidal's the king of paying. Spotify's the king of delivering the numbers. 3 million. YouTube is up to 2 million. That was not the case 2 years ago. Pandora's up to 1.3 million. It's the bottom, but a lot better than what they were. Apple's up to 8 million, which is interesting. So Apple's now, paying better than Spotify. That, they were close together before. And Amazon's at 4 million. So that's kind of giving you, and I think there's maybe 250 songs with 1 billion streams on Spotify now. They have a playlist called the Billionaire Streams Club. So no one else has that playlist, but that's pretty small considering all the songs that have been released out there. And just to put it in perspective, I mean, of the old school folks, Queen has the most. They have at least 3 or 4. They have more than the Beatles, and I don't think Elvis has 1 billion streams in these songs. The last I checked. Led Zeppelin was getting close to, with Immigrant Song and Stairway to Heaven the last I checked. The Stones don't have any billionaire streams. Mike just passed over Michael Jackson with, can't remember which one it was, but he just had one pass, and he has another close going in the billionaire stream. So, even big name, legacy artists are not getting the streaming numbers like Drake and Taylor Swift and these newer artists. So that's something to keep in mind. Well, what can you start doing, if you, just paid, a couple $100 million for a catalog? Two of the more interesting folks, are the Rolling Stones and Queen of what they've been doing. So let's talk about Queen. They're going to break the bank and, looking between $1 billion and $1.2 billion. So what have they done? Well, so far, they have, 3 volumes of greatest hits, sequentially. So they're covering their catalog. They have a very large catalog. So that's the first thing they've done is and these are probably 40 to 50. I have the CDs of these. They're probably 40 songs each. So that's the first thing they've done. The other thing is they now have a Deep Cuts album, 3 volumes of that. So, what they're doing is they're trying to make their catalog more accessible to folks who weren't alive when, I think they released their last album in the early 90s. So, if you're, and Gen Z put them back on the map. And so they're really working, with Gen Z to make their catalog, accessible as quickly as possible. So if you're Gen Z, you can either, take that, 30 to 40, timeless classics by Queen, Queen's greatest hits, whatever, and take the 30, 40 greatest ones that would be on the album like that, and then move on to the 3 volumes of greatest hits, or do the deep cuts. So they're doing a very good job of breaking up their catalog into smaller pieces. And putting it out there like that. Then they're starting to release a lot of the live stuff too. The Rolling Stones, so they're doing a lot of live albums. The Rolling Stones are, and then they're doing a very interesting thing. They're compilations, and I would call them EPs. And they're usually 5 or 6 songs. So here's some of the things that they're doing: Protest, Reflection, Torn Up, Hard Blues. These are titles of their EPs. Country Blues, Walking the Dog. Walking the Dog is interesting. It's all of the Rolling Stones songs that have a animal in it. So Wild Horses is on that. I forget, they have a couple of other ones. Around and Around is another EP. Not Fade Away is another EP. Good Times is another one. Happy's probably on that Keith sings. Keith's Kaleidoscope. Yeah, some weird titles. I think 1,000 Man's on that. I'd much rather be with girls. That's an EP. Then You Can't Catch Me. And then the final EP is Playing with Fire. So, the Stones have a huge catalog, and they're kind of parceling it up. Luckily for the Stones, they have what, 6 or 7 different greatest hits by era. So you have, from '67 back, which I don't think the Stones owned, and you have that, then you have a bunch of greatest hits dealing with their stuff from the '70s. So they already kind of had it, sectioned off in greatest hits, but now the Stones are starting to release albums of, Some Girls Live. So just the album Some Girls, and they probably now have 30 or 40 live albums that they've released. So yeah, I mean, those are two of the ones that are interesting that but a lot of these, they're paying a lot of money for these catalogs, and these catalogs are really big, and you need to kind of figure out how you're gonna make them manageable for people to digest, so they can become fanatics, just like the grandparents were, with the kids that will be listening to this music. So myself, I've already started doing this with my own music, because I've released 5 albums, and I already have 68 songs out there. So I have Prime Cuts, which is kind of my version of the greatest hits, All Rap All Day. So, I mean, that's where I put my rap songs. Love Stories, that's where I put my love song, ballads. That's where I'm putting ballads right now. Rock and Roll Dreams, that's where I put my rock infused stuff. Read Between the Lines, this is where I'm putting my instrumentals. And Everything is of the Funks, that's where my funk is going. Power Politics and More Politics, that's where I'm putting my politically charged music. I have another one called The Experience and the Journey, and that's kind of, looking back and, reflecting on some of the things in my life. So I'm already trying to kind of break my own catalog down at 68 songs. And so, yeah. So what branding a music catalog in the 21st century, what's that going to entail? Well, I've come up with a phrase called passive branding, and what is that? Well, I mean, one of the things I really think that will help a lot is kind of making it less expensive to sample. And I remember the sampling era from hip hop in the late 80s and early 90s, and a lot of careers were revived from that sampling. James Brown and P-Funk, George Clinton, and George even put out a CD called A Little Bit of This and A Little Bit of That for folks to actually sample. He actually encouraged it, even though he probably didn't get paid. Well, look, you're going to get paid now. But here's the thing. If you want to sample a song, it's going to run you $10,000 to $15,000, from what I understand. It's not like doing a cover song. It's different from a cover song, because you're not doing the exact lyrics and whatnot. So I mean, you can go on. There's 3 or 4 big music distributors for folks that they can use, and I know DistroKid, you can do you can do covers, and you can put figure out who the writer is or whatever, and put that in, and then they'll get the money for the writing credits for that stuff. They will not do that with sampling. And again, sampling, you're doing something different with the music, and one of the things about why some artists were really keen on owning their catalogs is because they could basically, if they comes in with a song that they sample and they don't like it, they can say, nope, that's not happening. But if they don't own the catalog, then it's up to the record company or whoever owns the catalog. Like, we don't care. It sounds like it'll make some money. So, we need to, these folks have, bought the catalogs to make money. Folks sold the catalogs and they were giving up, they gave up the right to refuse, for lack of a better term. So can we get, some sort of bank where you can, buy a license for $99, $199? I mean, this is passive branding, and what you're doing is you're letting someone else rework your song for what's in a way that's strong in the current market. So, talking about giving a song new life. Hopefully this will be a way of kind of reinvigorating and a rebirth for these songs and making them new again and letting someone else make them new. Thinking of Genius of Love by who did that? Tom Tom Club. We had Mariah Carey redid it, and then lately Lotto did it. Her first, single, I think, the Tom Tom Club, and then you got, the Message from back in the day, and then, Ice Cube, samples the Message and has a smash with Check Yourself, and then last year, a young unknown rapper samples, the Message and has got some good airplay out of that. So those are two lineages of songs that every generation someone's sampled that and it's hit. So that's my first thing is to make sampling accessible to these folks out here, and they'll start sampling this stuff and giving these DJ Khaled last year did Layla by Eric Clapton, got some radio play, hit the charts, didn't hurt Layla at all. I mean, and I'm sure a lot of people who heard that song was like, what song is that? I've heard that before. They looked it up, and I bet you Layla's streams went up after that. So that's the first big thing. The other thing is, try to do some movies, TV shows, plays, and documentaries about, the artists that you've, look, the latest Elvis movie, I did an episode on that, clearly branding and dealing, trying to refocus, what I think are misconceptions on Elvis and race, but they did that, and they were, in my opinion, borrowing from Johnny Cash's brand, and trying to bring that over to Elvis's brand. I mean, Elvis is complicated. I think he gets a bum rap, when it comes to, race. But, that was clearly, rebranding. The Beatles, Across the Universe, what was that, 10, 15 years ago, that movie, maybe it wasn't about Brandon. I saw this CD, but yeah, you do something like that now, that's clearly about, rebranding the Beatles. Then there was a weird thing in the last 10 years. There's some weird movies where folks from India would come, the country India, where he was a Bruce Springsteen fan, and I don't know if I haven't seen the movie, but it was if this was rebranding, or trying to repackage Bruce Springsteen for younger folks, and then you had the weird movie where the Beatles were erased from history, and some person who remembered the Beatles and had access to all the catalog and remade their catalog and got really rich. And this is kind of like, that sounds like a rebrand, even though I didn't see either one of the movies, but it just sounds like a rebrand. I know, Paul and Ringo have pushed back against a, Beatles miniseries for years, but I hear the BBC has one in the works. Michael Jackson, they're working on a movie, and his nephew's going to play him. We'll see how that goes. There's a Rick James Broadway show traveling right now. From what I understand, is doing very good. Yeah, I mean, I saw Ain't Too Proud to Beg on the Temptations about 2 or 3 years ago. Loved the show. Did a great job of rebranding. Of branding, not just rebranding, but branding the Temptations. I mean, they're the most successful R&B group of all time when it comes to the Billboard charts. I know they took Tina on the road, Broadway. So, and definitely want to see that when it's back on the road. That with the movie. Um, Tina, branded out, out of the tragedy with Ike very well out of that movie. So yeah, but documentaries are very important because you can do, they're a lot cheaper. You can do a lot with documentaries. I mean, Kiss is, I think, just sold there, and I think they sold for 500 million. But Kiss has two of the best documentaries ever. When Kiss ruled the world, which is about, Kiss from 76, 77, and 78, when they were the most popular music act on the planet. And it just captures it perfectly that time. I mean, that towards the end of that reign, Prince's reign, or Kiss's reign, that's when I kind of got into Kiss. But I remember the hype, and man, that documentary does a good job. And there was another documentary done on Kiss when the reunion tour, when Peter Criss and Ace Frehley were coming back and they did the makeup. I think that was all the same tour, but that was a very good, documentary too. So documentaries are a lot cheaper. You can get them focused, on a particular time period or a particular album or a particular song, but that stuff is very, very powerful in branding. So, yeah, why, all these folks who, who bought these catalogs, they should have a YouTube channel for whatever acts they bought, and should be at least working on documentaries about these artists. Or, I mean, come on, Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA. I mean, it's one of the biggest selling albums of all time. We need a documentary, Even if Bruce doesn't want to, because Bruce, hardly ever does interviews. Bruce did put out a biography, so, but even the folks around him, someone's gonna talk. Get that done. I mean, that's a mammoth album. I mean, Bob Dylan and going electric at Newport. We heard a lot about it, and I need to go and check out his, Dylan Spotify, Is that concert out there? I would love to hear it. The Newport concert. Those. Even if people are booing, so what? I want to hear it. I want to hear the reaction. I want to hear how it sounded. I mean, two famous things are on YouTube. There's a pretty crappy sounding version of Prince, opening up for the Rolling Stones. Prince got booed off the stage with the Stones, and I think it was 82. Still out there, still wanted to heard it. And then, when April 4th, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, and Bobby Kennedy, RFK Sr., was here in Indianapolis, did his speech. That night, and Indianapolis didn't riot, and Boston's the other city that didn't riot because James Brown was supposed to do a concert. He kept his word and did the concert, and the concert was put on all, ABC, NBC, and CBS in Boston. So Boston didn't riot, but the concert was put on there live, and it was, and that concert's on YouTube, and it's very interesting because at the end people get a little unruly, but James calms the crowd down. But it's a historic concert, and it's very interesting. Dylan at Newport's the same way. I'd love to see that. So those are the kind of things, get a YouTube channel. If there's already documentaries out there on an artist whose catalog you purchase, get them and put them in one place and figure out the interesting things out there that people would like to, a documentary or mini documentary on. The other thing too is, look at the hidden gems. Some things weren't, look. When Kiss put out I Was Made for Loving You, folks hated it. It was like, oh, Kiss is doing disco. And, yeah, that's a disco song. It's not a funk song. But, it's top 5 now in streams for Kiss. So you got to revisit that song. I mean, it took a while, but hey, it worked, and it's it's pushed through, so to speak. So yeah, YouTube channel. The other interesting thing is get on all the social media platforms. There was a very interesting time on Facebook from about 2017 to 2020 where you have all these groups, whether, I'm in some Beatles groups, I'm in some Stones groups, lots of Prince's groups, the Doors groups, and I'm trying to think of the other one that and Hendrix. And so, but there was a while where you could not tell me that, Facebook was not sending in or paying fans to go in there and put, and seed, with interesting questions, and then, seeding more questions to keep it going. Some very interesting things that sort of reminded me, in the early 2000s there were chat rooms, and I didn't realize, but, there was a very active Prince community in these chat rooms in the early 2000s, which I totally missed. I was getting career stuff going in the early 2000s, and I had no idea. But once Prince passed, and, listening to the Prince podcast and some of these other things, and a lot of folks met in these chat rooms, and they'd go up when Prince was doing his shows at Paisley Park. So, they would, folks would get together on a chat room, like, hey, I'm going to, Prince is going to be doing shows the week of August 3rd, and I'm going, and they go and meet up, and they, friendships came out of that. But, and then I heard, retroactively about how all the stuff and all the discussions they had in the chat rooms, and Facebook kind of reminded me of that. So, so some of the interesting things I remember, being on a Jimi Hendrix chat group, and they were like, well, who's the second best, guitarist of all time? And interestingly enough, was, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Prince kind of split the vote for second place behind Hendrix, which I thought was interesting. Lots of interesting things, I've seen happen in these. Rarely, the only time I see it now is sometimes with the generational. So, I'll be in a Gen X, chat, and they'll be like, the 5 best love songs of all time. Then it gets interesting, but it's not often where, it used to consistently happen from 2017 to maybe 2019. And I think Facebook wanted to expand their page and those pages in the group thing and get them more active. But, I'm saying all this to if you buy, if you paid a couple $100 million for a catalog, it might behoove you to get a group on there and get very active with that group, and seed it with some interesting questions, and get, bring the passion and the fire of the fan base out on social media. And again, this is stoking the fire. That's not passive branding. That's engaged branding. So I guess in conclusion, get a model, and I'm sure it's coming this way. They're going to do that anyway. It's just going to take years to make up that money if all they're doing is relying on streaming. But I gave you the numbers. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to be revisiting this. I'll probably do an episode. I've been waiting to do a Kiss and branding episode, so I will do some specifics on Kiss, and I'll probably do a few things of what I would do if I was in a room with whoever owns Prince's catalog. So yeah, let me work on this closing here. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, leave some comments. Definitely, please, for this one, leave some comments, because we're in a new era. We're only 2 years into this music catalog era. It's going to be fascinating to watch, to see what folks do. But yeah, so I have, as I said earlier in the episode, 5 albums of my own. They're on this channel attached to YouTube. They're on all the streaming services, Exodus, XODUS. I also have 2 science fiction fantasy novels and a novella on Amazon. So thank you for coming through, and I will see you next episode.